Hi, Stories Channel here.
And today we're covering a 2006 horror movie called Stay Alive. The starting scenes of the film depict the visions from a video game where the main character enters a haunted house and faces various ghosts and corpses. After facing several demons, the character eventually dies as he gets pushed from the mezzanine and gets hung by the chains. After the game is over, the movie shows us the player who calls his friend to tell him about the creepy game. After ending the call, he reluctantly gets up and goes upstairs to find his other two friends making out with each other. The guy jokes a bit and goes to sleep. In the middle of the night, he wakes up and walks downstairs to grab something to drink, but his senses tell him about something unusual. The eeriness looms over him and he suddenly turns around to witness the horrifying sight of a huge shadow staring at him. The guy freaks out and runs upstairs to find a ruthless bloodbath of his friends. He traces his steps backwards, but something suddenly pulls him and he breaks the railing to end up hanging to a rope. As his corpse dangles, the camera blacks out. The following morning, we see the deceased's friend, named Hutch, walking to the office where he meets his boss Miller and they discuss the ideas about the game development and their possible scenarios. In the meantime, Hutch receives a call and the world shifts around his head as he hears about his friend, Loomis's death. In order to pay his condolences, he goes to the funeral and meets everyone. As he sits in the front row, a girl in the background snaps his picture and later walks up to him and they start talking. She states that she was a friend of Loomis's girlfriend. During their talk, Loomis's sister, Emma, comes to greet Hutch and offers him a bag containing Loomis's video games. Afterwards, Hutch bids farewell to Emma and accepts the number from the photographer girl named Abigail. Later, he walks to a gaming club where he meets with a girl named October and her brother Finn. The raw guy jokes about Loomis's death but keeps it light. As Hutch explains the whole incident, his friends take out the stuff from the bag and October enthusiastically watches Hutch's childhood pictures with Loomis. Meanwhile, Finn pulls out a lighter and a sudden dreadful flashback appears before Hutch's eyes. Ignoring that, Finn advances to pull out the disc for the game named Stay Alive. All of them check the game that Loomis played before dying, and Finn suggests trying it out anyway. Later that night, Hutch is at home, washing glasses when his friend named Swink comes over. The others join in as well and they all settle in front of the TV to turn on the game. Before they can start, Miller joins them as well from his office and all of them coordinate to play the video game. The game starts off with a script, The Prayer of Elizabeth, being shown in a diary. Abigail gives a thought that it might be voice activated and it turns out to be so. Everyone chants the seance and the game begins. As the players customize their characters, the voice dictates that they've made a grave mistake and will soon die for it. Furthermore, they've been marked for death and this choice has brought them to Jarrig Plantation. Upon hearing that, October states that she has heard this story from her grandma. The voice continues to explain the story of Countess Elizabeth Báthory and the game shifts into action where the players face a small ghost. To avoid them, it is instructed to throw a red rose so that the undead can be eradicated. With that, they play on. Everyone gets immensely indulged in the game including Miller. But he starts to get queasy due to the gory scenes in the game and just as he reaches the torture chamber, the Countess comes from behind and kills his character. Miller gets exhausted and unwell as he explains the scenario to his friends. Just then, someone moves in his hall but Swing just excuses it as perceptive reality. Afterwards, all of the friends decide to end the game and leave. Miller also does so, but as he leaves his office, the door opens behind him all by itself. He walks back to close it but the same thing occurs as he turns around again. For the second time, he walks in and finds his controller vibrating. With a smile, he gets back up, but there, a horrendous ghost attacks him and finishes him amidst his echoing screams. The following day, Hutch returns to office and receives the tragic news of Miller's death. He sits aside in grief when a detective named Thibodeau comes to him and starts a brief inquiry. Hutch tells him about everything and he leaves him with a card. As he gets up, Hutch takes one sorrowful look at Miller, who lay dead on the table. Later, they return to the gaming cave where we witness that Miller was killed the exact same way he died in the game. Finn doesn't think of it as much of a big deal, which is off-putting for everyone, and they leave him playing alone. Outside on the balcony, October asks Abigail about her life and she states that her dad is an architect and her mother is a kindergarten school teacher. Moreover, she's going to Princeton. Everyone admires her perfect life and October flares up a lighter which gives Hutch a strong shudder. Upon Abigail's inquiry, Hutch regards it as an old incident and waves it away. Afterwards, they discuss the possibilities of how both of their friends were murdered after they finished playing the game. In the meantime, Finn can be seen starting the game on his own and his player breaks a mirror as a horse carriage runs behind him. But instead of playing further, he pauses it right there. On the other hand, after Hutch's conclusion, all of them run towards Finn who is just dramatically asleep. They take a sigh of relief and Finn gets up to state that Hutch is just overthinking and creeping it out for everyone else. Afterwards, everyone goes on with their regular routines. Swink fondles the computers. October cleans the coffee machine. Hutch goes for a shave while Finn checks on his car. During all of this, everyone experiences an abnormality. Finn almost gets crushed by a truck. The illusion of mirror cracking springs in front of Hutch. October visualizes a ghost behind her while Swink's keyboard and system starts bleeding out. Ignoring all of that, they continue their routines and Hutch sneaks into the archives where he steals all the files and details from the police systems. But as he's leaving, a ghost crosses the end of the hall. Later that day, he meets up with his friends and puts forward his idea of the killings again. He correlates the death of the players in the game with the real killings and how they all died the same way. That freaks out everyone, and October then explains the story of Jarrett Plantation and how there's this possibility that Elizabeth Báthory is back and is now hunting for them as he hunted in her time period, on a horse-drawn carriage. But this time, Hutch refuses to believe her story and contradicts her. On the other hand, we witness Finn enjoying his drive while blaring the music on the speakers. As he drives along the empty stretch of road, the weather starts to darken and suddenly a kid appears in front of his car. Finn swerves his vehicle aside aggressively and it gets stuck. He walks out on the empty road and calls his friends to tell them about his situation. They all decide to come for him. In the meantime, Finn starts hearing the neighing of horses around him. Worry-stricken, he looks around in confusion and suddenly out of nowhere, the horse carriage appears behind Finn and runs over him. Unfortunately, his friends arrive late and Finn expires. His sister drops beside his dead body and starts mourning over his demise. Meanwhile, Hutch finds out that Finn also died the same way he was killed in the game. He tries to explain it to Detective Thibodeau, along with the evidence, but the detective takes him aside. Meanwhile, the other officer named King starts playing the game where he also dies. Suddenly, Hutch runs back and closes the laptop, stating not to touch the game at all. But the officer reacts to him and lets him be him. Later, all the fine sit in the gloomy mood while October blames Hutch for her brother's death as he was the one who brought the game. Therefore, Hutch deeply apologizes to her as she becomes determined to seek revenge. In the meantime, the officer named King walks into a video game store and asks for the Stay Alive game, but the counter guy states that there's no such game like that. Therefore, King leaves the store, but just as he climbs in his truck, he catches the glimpse of a ghost in his rearview mirror and gets murdered ruthlessly. The scene now shifts to Hutch and Abigail, who try to sneak into Loomis Crowley's mansion. Hutch explains their friendship since childhood and how they took him in after his parents left. Furthermore, he states the biggest tragedy of his life was when his angry father lit the whole house on fire and his mother got engulfed by the fire. That's the reason he cringes from the fire. As they discuss this, Hutch climbs in from the window and opens the door for Abigail. They observe the broken railing and walk into Loomis's room to find his cell phone, and on that, Hutch reads the address of the gaming company where Loomis got the game from. With that lead, they drive towards 1420 Cypress Road and gain assistance of navigation from their friends. In the meantime, October states about the book called The Malleus Demonium, which explains that you have to put 3 nails in Elizabeth's heart, neck and forehead. Furthermore, they have to burn it later in order to cleanse her undead soul. Hutch temporarily refuses to believe it, but he gets left with no choice. Meanwhile, the news shows the death of the officer, and at the same time, police arrive to raid their apartment. October and Swing barely make it out from the backside as the police barge in and toss the apartment. Detective Thibodeau finds a paper regarding the facts about Elizabeth Báthory. On the other hand, the guys drive to Loomis's house where they argue about the seance, but they suddenly find out that the game is already being played and October is outside. Someone is watching her through the window of a wretched building, and in reality, October is actually outside an old building and someone is watching her. She slowly enters the abandoned building while her friends run out looking for her. Inside the dark spaces, October cautiously walks amidst the hall where she finds an ankle shackle on the floor. Instantly, some entity passes in front of her and disappears. October then takes out a hammer and some nails from the side and finds a nail gun as well. Holding it as her weapon, she nears the ghost of Elizabeth and fires the nails, but they fly through her and she's unharmed. Due to the failure of her attempt, October tries to run away for her life but gets shackled by the ankle brace. In the meantime, her friends hear her screams and try to enter the site, but the door gets locked. October is hoisted up in the air upside down and Elizabeth slashes across her neck. Just then, her group runs inside and Hutch finds her bleeding out. The tragedy then befalls them as October also dies in their arms. The next scenario shows us the group driving towards the house. During the drive, Abigail reveals that her life is not perfect and she has nothing except this van they're traveling in. They all listen to her and decide to put an end to it. Swink opens the game and decides to play it as it can't be stopped. After a while, they arrive at the 1420 house. Abigail and Hutch walk towards it while Swink plays the game. Inside the house, Abigail locates different floor plans and finds Elizabeth's doll. On the other hand, Swink realizes that he's in the game at the same house and he calls Hutch to tell him about it. He guides him to the back door by playing the game. Meanwhile, Abigail roams into the room upstairs. Following Swink's guidelines, Hutch goes to the backyard and after crossing a gate, he comes across the real Jarrett plantation and the tower of Elizabeth Báthory. In the interim, Abigail enters the wardrobe and emerges into a workshop filled with insect-infested dolls and satanic illustrations. She even finds Elizabeth's diary, but that immediately causes everything around her to go dark. Hutch hears her terrorized shrieks and uses Swink's guidelines to reach Abigail. He climbs the stairs and runs towards the room while we witness Abigail being caught up by the ghosts. Luckily, Swink uses the game to throw roses towards the captivated Abigail and that liberates her in real life. As her life is saved, Hutch shows his gratitude to Swink. Unfortunately, Swink gets in trouble as the ghost now chases him in the carriage. He runs through the forest for the safety of his life and falls down to cover himself with roses. But as Hutch and Abigail return to the van, they see that Swink's game is over. Following the tragedy, Hutch breaks down, but they have to be on the run again as the carriage charges towards them through the Jarrett plantation. They make it to the tower and Abigail runs inside while Hutch uses a rose to disintegrate the ravenous horse carriage. Afterwards, they enter the tower and follow the stairs to a crypt where they constantly evade the monsters by using the roses. After entering a chamber, Hutch walks towards the tower staircase but the door gets locked behind him. Abigail wishes him the best of luck and hands him the lighter to burn Elizabeth's body. In order to finish all the drama, he climbs the staircase and comes across Elizabeth's corpse. As he plunges the nails in her body, Abigail gets captured by Elizabeth's ghost and she's hung upside down. Abigail screams in terror, but just as the ghost is about to impale her, Hutch inserts the last nail in Elizabeth's forehead and the ghost disappears. But the whole tower begins to shudder when Elizabeth's corpse gets alive. She advances towards Hutch, but he uses the laptop's shiny screen to show Elizabeth her reflection, which enrages her and she attains a horrific expression. Just then, Hutch turns on the lighter and puts her aflame. As the witch burns in agony, Hutch scoops up on the side and his childhood trauma flashbacks to him. He isn't able to let go of it, but just then, Swink and Abigail barge in the room and help him escape. Finally, they leave the tower burning and slowly move out of the Jarrett plantation. In the final moments of the film, we witness that the game Stay Alive is officially released in the stores as a major game. All the people are now chanting the seance, and with that, the movie concludes. Thanks for watching, guys.